Hi everyone, Company Jested Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new 100 GECS album, 10,000 GECS. Everyone, we have here one of the most anticipated follow-up albums of this decade so far. The 100 GECS album, 10,000 GECS. 100 GECS consists of two artists, Laura Les and Dylan Brady, who became one of the most buzzed about music duos out there around 2019 when they began popping off thanks to singles such as Money Machine, which didn't just create interest in them as a duo, which there was plenty of at first. But it wasn't just that, because the greater internet as well as Spotify's playlist division had decided that their sound wasn't just interesting, it was a genre in and of itself. Now, one could argue that the intense grooves and exaggeratedly bright and synthetic aesthetics of hyperpop predate the 100 GECS debut, but the fandom this album created cannot be denied, because for at least a year or two it kind of seemed like everybody and their mom wanted to make hyperpop, or invite Dylan onto their project to get one of his beats. So there were a lot of artists trying to strike the hyperpop iron while it was hot. Pretty much everyone other than GECS, which again, they did drop that remix album, but if the duo really wanted to, they could have easily pooped out another 23-minute record and said, bam, here you go, there's hyperpop too. But they didn't. And now in 2023, what GECS kinda did was just sat out the storm they accidentally created several years ago. And now a lot of the hyperpop feeding frenzy is more or less dead, which sure has its cons, but at least one big pro in the case of GECS. For one, there's a low likelihood of them being swallowed up in the eventual implosion that most micro trends within music see at some point, and also the freedom to creatively do whatever the heck they want instead of playing to an expectation, which I can't say I'm surprised about, because distilling 100 GECS debut down to a single genre label, even a new one that is specific to them, is a bit short-sighted, because with jarring combinations of ska, metal, glitch pop, hip-hop, and emo, the duo seems more dictated by volatility than predictability. So of course 10,000 GECS sees Laura and Dylan in no rush to fully repeat themselves, with tracks that either sound very little like something from the debut or like an elevated version of something from the debut. Some of which we already got a taste of as singles. There's Doritos and FRITOS with its chanted group vocals, its pronounced popped bass lines, punchy drums, and sporadic guitar noises, which come together sounding more like a zany rock song than anything you would typically stereotype as hyperpop. Then there's the closing track on here, MEMEME, which brings the very amped and jittery energy of your typical GECS song, but with more distortion, boomy riffs, and I suppose a streamlined sound as far as clearing out some of the glitchier elements of their last record. The track is simple, it's direct and heavy, which I think makes sense given the themes going on in the lyrics, about feeling ignored and unseen despite being as open and clear and honest about who you are and what you're about as possible. Deeper cuts like Hollywood Baby also bring the vibes of an over-the-top and kind of tongue-in-cheek rock anthem. And while those tracks felt a bit alien for GECS on this record, there's a lot about this project that feels kind of familiar. This thing is kind of brief, with 10 tracks that don't span past 30 minutes, and Lauren and Dylan still have little to no interest in taking themselves too seriously, which is probably the most true-to-form thing about the album. Now, sometimes the silliness or brevity of the cuts on this record can kind of get in the way of their impact or their full potential, just like with certain tracks on the debut. $1 Million comes to mind, which is fun but seems more like an absurd detour than a fully fleshed out song. There's 757, which does have a cool melodic earworm at the start but doesn't develop too far beyond that. I find the slowed down ending of the track to be kind of a cop-out too. Though the smoking tree-sized dicks line, that one's gonna stick with me for a while. Then there's Frog on the Floor, whose super cutesy chord progression combined with ribbit samples make it sound like a Yo Gabba Gabba musical segment, and whether that's a good or a bad thing I think depends on the listener. The outro is really cute and reminds me of a Unicorn song too, but really the super flat production and dry vocals for much of the track is what holds it back for me. It's kind of odd that GECS would put out something that is so lacking in punch and vibrance, especially on this record. record, which is just so over the top sonically much of the time. And I feel mostly the same with the track The Most Wanted Person in the United States, because despite its cartoony sound effects and claims of being a murderous outlaw, the track just feels like it's missing something due to sounding so low-key and muddy. But that Anthony Kiedis sucking penis line, that also is going to be sticking with me for a long time. So for sure there was a handful of tracks on this thing I wanted more from, but I still found the majority of tracks on this thing to be highlights, as long as you're willing to follow 100 gecs down whatever absurd rabbit hole they're traveling through, including Billy Knows Jamie, which in a sense feels like some Limp Bizkit-esque rap rock with the hilariously macho vocals and jump the fuck up riffs. Laura and Dylan somehow check all the worst boxes of this genre and somehow twist all of them into their favor with an absolutely crushing ending, which I think further illustrates a talent that gecs specifically have a knack for, and that is just turning some of the cheesiest trends from the 2000s into absurd, fun, and very playful art, which is why I think they gained so many ugly comparisons to a variety of very hated artists from the MySpace era back in the day on their debut. But their style, artistry, and vibe has always run much deeper than that. We also have the duo's big and triumphant return to ska on I Got My Tooth Removed, which has there ever been such a fun song about such a horrible thing? Now, is the tooth on this track literal? Is it metaphorical? There's an argument for the latter, but it stays on topic enough to where it could be the former, with Laura singing about having a hard time getting to sleep, the excruciating pain, wanting to yank it out herself, and also brushing every day. I love the progression of the track too, from the intro, which sounds really heartbroken and dramatic. Then right after that, the duo goes full skank mode with upstroked guitars, an oompa beat, and a horn section. Yeah, the track is comedic, it's outlandish, but it's so catchy and fun, I can't really deny its charms, which I think is how I would describe this album in a nutshell. Anyway, with 10,000 gecs, 100 gecs solidify themselves as one of the most respectable but also ridiculous music duos out there in modern music today. I'm feeling a light 8 on this LP. Transition, have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, 100 gecs, forever.